Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Jeff Mendelson, and this is the One Big Tip podcast. And today I am really pleased to have with me on the line Kathleen Booth. Kathleen is the VP of Marketing at Clean.io, the market leader in digital engagement security solutions used by businesses looking to optimize their revenue and buyer experience by taking back control over third-party code on their website. And prior to joining Clean.io, she spent 13 years in a digital marketing agency world, first as owner and CEO of Quintain Marketing, and then as a VP of marketing at Impact. She is also the host of the long-running Inbound Success podcast, which features interviews with marketers getting extraordinary results that listeners can learn from to improve their own marketing. Kathleen, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited.
I am too. This is going to be a lot of fun. I always love it when when a fellow podcaster can get on and it's like all the gear is already set. You don't have to do much prep and like it all works. So this is all great. Can you please take a little bit of time to tell everyone a little bit more about your background and how you got to Clean.io today?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I spent some time in the marketing agency world. I actually owned, with my husband, a marketing agency for about 11 years, and we're still married. We were one of HubSpot's top partners, and I actually sold the agency in 2017 to a friendly competitor, a company that at the time was the number one HubSpot partner globally, a company called Impact. I went there for 2 years and actually built a media company around the agency. So we started a large sales and marketing conference, a subscription-based online training program and community, and we were publishing over 30 pieces of new content a week. It was really fun. But my dream had always been to go in-house in a B2B tech company. You know, I'd been on the other side of it for so long in an agency, and I wanted to see it from the other side. And so for the last 2 years, I've been what I would describe as a serial startup marketer. I've gone into a number of startups, generally as the first head of marketing after they get their Series A round of funding. And I build the strategy, the brand, define the vision, the mission, and the values, put together the tech stack, and build the team. And that's what I love. And I think it's because I spent so long as an entrepreneur that, you know, being a startup marketer is the closest thing to channeling that. It's like building a marketing business within a business. And so I came to Clean.io earlier this year because it somehow miraculously combines three things that I have experience in and am passionate about that you never find together. So, and those three things are marketing to marketers, which I've spent my whole career doing, media, the media business. So I spent 2 years at Impact building a media company, and cybersecurity. I've worked in a number of cybersecurity companies, and I've had a number as clients through my agency. You don't often find those three things in one place. This was this crazy, unique opportunity to pull them together. And so I'm really excited to be here and working on digital engagement security.
You know, that is that's a really storied background, because you're right. One of the things that that I talk about as well is that you don't there are very few generalists around, right? And what happens is that you really do need to niche down into either some kind of industry or some kind of tech, or just some larger section of like how you're going to deliver the tech or the marketing, or whatever it is that you're delivering to your clients, right? But then dealing with the tech stack, right? That's where you're layering all of these different applications on top of each other, and you're basically keeping everything together, right? It almost feels like you're using band-aids to just hold things, to like hold things up, right? And there are some really great tools out there like Zapier and Integromat and things like that can concatenate one app to another, but sometimes that's not always the best, right? So you do want to make sure that you're making a viable tech purchase so that it does the most amount of functionality that your company's looking for. And I'm sure that's something that you've been around the block about. I would like to understand a little bit more though about about how the tech stack like really affects the customer engagement, as you talked about. When you go into a startup which probably doesn't have the history of the legacy of, oh, we have to use the CRM, or we have to use this this website platform. How do you get them to sort of coalesce everything so that it is in so that it is working for for your business and delivering an exceptional experience for their customers? Like, how do you plan that out?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different facets to that. So, I'm fortunate that I do come in generally after a company has had a round of funding, a round of venture capital funding. So there is a budget for the tech stack. And you're right, there are a lot of tools like Zapier and other tools out there that will connect the dots if you don't have a huge budget. And you can do amazing things with them. But there does come a point where I worry that if people rely too heavily on those things, it's like a house of cards, and one thing happens, like one of your zaps gets turned off and the whole thing comes crumbling down. And so I really enjoy coming in at the stage that I'm in because I generally don't have to clean up a large entrenched architected setup that isn't working. I'm usually coming in and putting in place the first system, and it's amazing the results you can see in a short amount of time. And so generally one of the first things that I look at is, how can we automate things? How can we leverage marketing automation to go faster, do more, be more efficient, and do it in a way that's really scalable? Because that's the big thing for fast growing startups, is it has to be able to scale. I might be coming in when there's only 20 employees, but the expectation is that in not a lot of time, there could be 200. And so you have to build with that in mind. And of course, as you mentioned, you have to build with the customer in mind. The biggest challenge, I think, honestly, and this is something I'm really passionate about, is that today, marketers tend to have larger IT budgets than the IT department in the company. And yet, we have been taught almost nothing about IT, right? When you go to school for marketing, you don't generally learn about the IT side of things. And then the other facet of that I'm passionate about is the cybersecurity side. I spent many years working with cybersecurity companies. I've been a VP of marketing for a cybersecurity company, and it really opened my eyes to just how little marketers know about it. And all of these considerations around choice of tech stack and how secure it is have a major influence on, your customer experience, your brand reputation, and your potential revenue. And so there's really large things at stake, and we tend to walk in very unprepared to deal with them.
That is so true, right? Because what happens is, yeah, when that zap breaks and the correct folder or the correct file isn't placed in the right area, and then the customer notices that, and it's just like to reconnect all the plumbing is a really it's a pain. It's a pain in the butt, because what happens is, like, you really have to like figure out, first of all, what happened, and then, follow the steps, and then make sure that it doesn't happen again. And it's such a tedious process that something that should have taken 5 minutes all of a sudden becomes like a 2-hour job. And yeah, I can tell you from experience, and I'm sure you can as well, it is a pain.
Yes.
I would like to segue into our one big tip, right? And this really caught my eye when when you sent it over to me, is the relationship between the customer experience, what they see on your on your website, profit margins. Obviously, you want to get the clients in, and you want to have you don't want to spend too much money in keeping them, and and servicing them, but also as it relates to cybersecurity. And I think a lot of people miss that part, where it's like, how do you keep both the website secure, customer data secure? How does all that how does all that interact with each other in your world?
Sure. So I think a little table setting before I get too much into the cyber weeds. I would say that, when I think about marketing, I've said this for a long time, every company out there is fundamentally in the same business. We are all in the business of selling trust, right? Whether we're selling marketing services, sneakers, tractors, or computers. Everybody is selling trust, and people aren't going to buy from you if they don't trust you. And traditionally with businesses, that trust was built when somebody walked into your office building or into your store or had a meeting with you, et cetera. And you could establish trust through those personal interactions, the engagements that you had with your customers. And now, especially more so than ever in the last year, business is moving online. And the way you establish trust has changed. It's through digital engagements as opposed to in real life engagements, right? And so we have to think about, how do we control and architect those digital engagements? And as marketers, we're always taught that our website is an owned asset, right? We talk about owning your website, and then things like your social profiles not being owned because you don't have full control over them. And so we like to think that on our website, that's where we have full control over the user experience. But the truth is we really don't, because the way the modern internet functions, there is a ton of third-party code that runs on our sites. Some of it is code that we put there intentionally. So think about things like plugins, right? Most content management systems that websites are built on these days have plugin ecosystems. And so we let that code in, and hopefully we're doing our homework to make sure that those plugins are, reputable and are not going to do harm. I don't think everybody does. I think there's a lot of marketers who just sort of take it on faith that the plugins are going to be fine, but we let that code in. And then there's third-party code that we don't necessarily allow in. And a very good example of that is something in the cyber world that's called client-side injections. And what that means in plain English is client-side is coming from your user, meaning somebody visits a website. So if I'm out surfing the internet and I go to a website, I have all kinds of things on my computer that can affect the websites I'm visiting. And a great example of that, one of the most common ones, is browser extensions. So when I go to the Chrome web store or the Safari store or what have you, and I install extensions on my computer, those extensions, believe it or not, have a very elevated level of permission that allows them to run scripts on websites, whether the website wants it there or not. And so that introduces a whole nother element of code for website owners that they have very little control of and often don't even know is happening. So, my company, we have a couple of products that deal with this. And so we have a very interesting insight into what does happen on websites. And we look at all this third-party code, and, you see examples where it not only do you worry about just plain old cybersecurity, your website being hacked or something, but you also have to worry about the user experience and your revenue. So, two quick examples to help, bring this to light. When we talk about user experience, a really good example is if you go to a publisher website, think CNN.com, FoxNews.com, any website that takes ads, Barstool Sports, for example. All these websites have ads on them. If you are a website visitor and you click on an ad, ads are actually third-party code. Believe it or not, all these websites accept ads programmatically. So the ads are piped in, and they don't evaluate them one by one. They buy them through exchanges. I, as a user, might click an ad, and I'm sure everybody who's listening has had this happen to them at least once. You click an ad and a big pop-up comes up, and all of a sudden you're being entered in a sweepstakes you didn't want to be entered into, and you can't click out of the pop-up. Or even worse, maybe some virus gets on your computer. I always worry about this with my 14-year-old son and his video games. And so that's a terrible user experience, right? From third-party code in the form of ads. Now, third-party code can also affect your revenue. So an example of that would be browser extensions. Many people who shop online use extensions like Honey or Capital One Shopping to get a discount. And those are extensions that we, as users, put on our computers. And what happens is when I go to a website, if I have that on my computer, put some things in my shopping cart and go to check out, all of a sudden that extension will pop up and it will say, hey, we've got 10 codes for this site. How would you like to save 20%? And it'll start to auto inject those codes into the discount field at checkout until it finds a big discount. Now, as a website owner, I don't have any control over that. And so what it's doing is offering discounts to people who are already at checkout, basically about to give me their money. And those don't tend to be shoppers that need discounts. And so that hits my profit margins, and I have very little control over it. So those are just a few examples. I'm going to pause because I've been talking for a long time and see if you have any questions.
So far, that has been exactly my experience, right? I mean, I manage right now about 100 some WordPress sites, and I see, like weekly, like just something, like just something off over here, like on one site, and sometimes it can propagate to others on the server. Other times it can seriously exasperate a small problem into a big one. But I think more of what I think about when I'm putting this stuff together is that, I really question what am I putting on here, right? So I used to just grab, for example, any old WordPress theme that I found that more or less matches the design or the function of what I'm trying to do. I stopped doing that maybe like 4 or 5 years ago because templates also need to be
Yeah.
need to be sound. There are all kinds of scripts and things that the developers can use to siphon off information, right? And we're practically in a world right now where there is so much information going back and forth. I mean, I have a plugin, I have a Chrome extension on my thing where I'm looking at the, what do you call it? The Facebook pixel. So I see what information is being collected, not only on my sites, but any site that I visit. Right. And right now we're using Restream, and I see the number that, there are 48 events that have been, that have been collected at some point, which is an obscene number of events. Right. And it just goes to show, like, okay, they're collecting audience on me, they're collecting audience on you, the people that I interview. So, it is a trade-off, right? But at the same time, it does give, some functionality, right? They're building a bigger audience, whatever they're going to do with that audience data. But at the same time, they developed a really good user experience for setting up live streams, right? My big question, though, is that how can you take back control of that when you're setting this up? What are some of the things a website owner or a marketing agency should be looking for so that you are only collecting the information that you want or need, and B, how to make it as secure as possible for you users? Because at the end of the day, that's why we're here, to create a great user experience so that they give us more money.
Sure. Well, I think there's a couple of levels on which you can tackle the problem. And I would be really remiss if I didn't start with the need to educate yourself first. This is a huge gap in the field of marketing in general. As I said when I started talking, we're never taught this, right? It's a real problem, I think, in the world of marketing, that we're not more educated about the technology, about the security risks, et cetera. And it's time that starts to change. And so as a marketer, I would say it's really important for you to educate yourself about security issues, not only because these are things that are affecting the businesses we work for, but you could really, really put your career in jeopardy if the worst happens, because websites are, in many cases, companies' brands. If somebody takes over the website, steals the personal information of your customers, the liability is huge, the brand damage is huge. And if you are a marketing leader or an aspiring marketing leader, those are the things that you're responsible for, right? And so get educated. There are a lot of resources out there that are free for you to learn more about cybersecurity in general. That's number one. Number two is ask a lot of questions. I mentioned there's different types of third-party code, a lot of which we literally open the door and invite in. And so I think we have to start there and say, all this code that we're allowing on our sites. And you mentioned even more examples than I did. You talked about like WordPress themes. That's a great example. There are definitely, there've been a lot of press about some themes that have determined to be malicious, that are literally built with the express purpose of harvesting personally identifiable information for resale on the dark web. So you've got to do your research on the themes, do your research on the plugins, do your research on the pixels you're adding. I mean, that the amount of third-party code is it's mind-boggling. And the good news is that there are a lot of really great tools out there, some of which are also third-party code that you can use to figure out what you have running on your site. Because like sometimes that's the first problem. You don't even know what's happening there. And so you could get an extension like a built with, for example. And there are plenty of others out there where you can actually visit your site and see a lot of the third-party tools that are installed or running on the site or that have script on page, and do your research into them. Look at reviews. Go to the websites of the vendors for these tools, and if they don't publish anything about what they're doing on security, go to their Q&A or their chat bot or their live chat and ask. That's number 2. So number 1 is educate yourself. Number 2 is ask a lot of questions. And then number 3 is, I think it's important to look into what the tools are that are available to protect you. And the good news is there are a lot of them these days. So, it's everything from having, security plugins for your website that are expressly to protect it, or choosing your host wisely. Like with WordPress, for example, certain hosts have built in more security than others, and then down to other tools like the ones that we make. So, we have 2 products, Clean Ad and Clean Cart, that happen to come at this from very specific angles. So Clean Ad protects publishers from malvertising, which is malicious ads, and Clean Cart is our other product that protects e-commerce brands from the auto injection of coupon codes at checkout. And there are plenty of other products out there that do things like protect your site from bots, and different, vulnerabilities that you may have. So get educated, ask a lot of questions, and then do your research on the tools available to protect your site. I think those are the 3 steps.
That's it sounds really easy when you say it, right? Go educate yourself, right? I mean, if you're not so if you're not a tech person and you don't understand what codecs are, or bit rates, or all that stuff, like that jargon can be pretty overwhelming,
Yeah.
fairly quickly. How would you what would be a good resource to help someone, to earnestly educate themselves about this, right? One of the things that comes to mind for me, for instance, well, there's always the University of YouTube, right? You can practically YouTube anything, and somebody already made a vlog about it where they go and explain it, right? But especially in cybersecurity, you could get somebody who's immediately going to be talking way over your head, right? And you're just not going to understand something. And of course, that's only their opinion, right?
Yeah.
About how things are implemented. It's not necessarily fact. I mean, it may be good information, or it may, or even if it's something that was recorded, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, that may be hopelessly out of date at this point. How do you steer people towards the first step of educating themselves on doing this, on taking charge of this particular aspect of their business so that they can be more profitable in the future?
Sure. So and to be clear, I'm definitely not recommending that everybody educate themselves to the extent that they know the code and can go in and troubleshoot and debug themselves. I don't think that's realistic, right? We became marketers for a reason, not cybersecurity experts
Because we
or
don't want to
computer
touch that.
programmers. Right. So a couple things. I think that what I'm really suggesting is that you educate yourself to the point where you know what you don't know, right? And then you understand who to go get help from to fill in those gaps. So a good objective place to start, honestly, is the Department of Homeland Security, because they have a lot of resources on cybersecurity and they link off to a lot of free training. And so if you're ever concerned whether the resource that you're looking at to try to learn more is a verifiable one that knows what it's talking about, that's a great starting point because they've done a lot of the homework for you. So go to the Department of Homeland Security, look in their cybersecurity sections and check out those resources there. Take some classes online. There's some really good basic introductory ones. And then from there, I would say there's a massive opportunity for more marketing agencies, especially ones that do web design, to provide services around this. I mean, there are certainly IT companies, managed IT service providers who do this, but they don't know as much about marketing as the marketing agencies. And so it's almost like I want somebody to marry the two together, to take a managed IT service provider and merge it with a marketing agency. And that would be sort of the perfect solution. But in the meantime, I think the key is that have a resource you trust, whether that is your managed IT company, whether that is your marketing agency who has somebody on the team who understands security. find a good resource, and maybe do an audit of your website and just see where you stand today. And then moving forward, as you add new things to your site, that's when you can start to ask those questions I talked about earlier.
Going to the Department of Homeland Security, um, you could have put any amount down, and I would never have guessed that one. But and that is going to be one black hole I'm going to go on after this call. Just trying to figure out, like, really, our government like puts out like really great advice on this stuff. Like, dude, I'm gonna eat this stuff up.
There's
you
actually a
know,
division of it called CISA. I can't remember what it stands for. I think it's CISA. And they're the ones that protect election integrity, and they do all kinds of other things. And they have good resources on there. They also, you can subscribe, and I'll see if I can find the link and I'll send it to you. But there is a place on there where you can subscribe to their bulletins. And so they have these email bulletins they release when they find critical vulnerabilities, and it could be in an operating system or in different software. They did one on WordPress not long ago for specific themes, and you'll get them by email. And that's also a great way to kind of stay on top of, breaking news on where there are problems.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's wonderful. Kathleen, can you please tell everyone how they can learn more about your company and how they can reach out to you directly if they'd like to learn more?
Sure. So it's really easy to find the company. Our name is clean.io, and that is also our URL. So visit us at clean.io, and you can read all about what we do and a little bit more about digital engagement security. And then I love answering questions. I'm happy to connect with anybody who's listening and interested. And you can find me most easily on LinkedIn, Kathleen Booth. And I also have a website, kathleen-booth.com, where you can find me, and it links off to my social profiles.
Amazing stuff. Kathleen, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a lot of fun. I love nerding out on this stuff. And you're right. Finding someone who does understand the IT and understands the marketing and the implications of them both really is a rare breed. So I'm really glad that you were able to help break that down for us today. And this is all great and stellar advice. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.